Okay, let's see if we may have had some improvement in that in the audio issue. If somebody would drop me a line, please let me know now that we think we've got this squared away. I would appreciate it. See if that sounds any better. I'm getting some responses. Yes, that's much better. Very good. We appreciate that. Thank y'all. We apologize for that. So what we were saying, this is actually a special edition that we originally were going to provide this webinar to the educational community K through 12 in Texas because of the issue that happened in Louisiana, where the governor had to declare a special emergency for that state because of ransomware in the schools there. But then we also had issues with local and with local governments here in Texas. So we opened this up to local governments, state governments, as well as schools. So we want to welcome everybody to the edition today. We are going to be talking about protecting our resources from ransomware, and we hope that y'all will find this this very, very beneficial. I've had the question, is this being recorded? And the answer to that is yes, it is being recorded. We will post that. We'll put that website up in a little bit. We will also make the slides available for anyone that needs to have the slides as well. So we will have question and answer period after we do the presentation. We are expecting some special guests today. We hope that they'll be able to provide some comments and answer some additional questions from law enforcement. So we're very pleased to have them join us as well. So we're talking a little bit about ransomware today, and many of us have heard what ransomware is. Maybe we're not real familiar with what ransomware does, how it works, what we can do to prevent that. So we're hoping that we'll cover all of those topics in today's presentation. We have for the educational community, we created a portal for cybersecurity, and it is Texas Gateway. That's located at https://www.texasgateway.org. If you go to that URL, you will actually see featured resources in the middle of the first page, and there is something there called Cybersecurity Tips and Tools. If you click on that folder, you will actually find all the webinars that we've had in the past. I believe we've conducted 13. That covers topics from every aspect of cybersecurity, like writing cybersecurity documentation, to doing risk assessments, to how to there's also resources out there on where you can find free cybersecurity training. As well as we'll talk a little bit about the Texas Cybersecurity Framework. That's one of the frameworks that we typically talk about. All of those resources are at that location. So if you're new to our webinars, please feel free to go out and take a look at that site, and we just share that information with anyone that we feel like we can share cybersecurity resources with. So if you've seen the headlines recently, you might have seen headlines that read such as "Ransomware attack on businesses are skyrocketing," or "Florida city pays $600,000 in ransom to end ransomware," or over 20 Texas local governments hit with a coordinated ransomware attack. Ransomware attack sends city of Del Rio back to the days of pen and paper. In fact, the sub-headline on that says servers at city halls were rendered useless due to the outbreak. Or hackers are holding Baltimore hostage. How did they strike, and what's next? Is ransomware really a problem? Well, there are maps out on the internet that track all of the reports of ransomware that appear in the news. So if you look at this, you go, wow, seems to be a lot of ransomware. But the reality is that this only represents maybe 50% of the actual ransomware that has been effective within the U.S. because in many cases, businesses, private industry may not be required to report that, so they may not report that at all. So in most cases, this typically will reflect for local governments, schools, that type that show up on this map. So if you can envision doubling those marks, then you'd realize that this really is an issue that we need to try to address. So ransomware is a type of malicious software, or malware as it's more commonly referred to, that's designed to deny access to a computer system or data until a ransom is paid. It typically spreads through phishing emails or by unknowingly visiting an infected website. We've also recently seen some that involve service providers, where service providers may have had credentials that have been compromised, so some of the people that they provide services to also are infected. But the most common way that we still see ransomware spread today is through phishing emails. Is anyone immune? Absolutely not. There is no one that's immune to this type of attack. Government organization, medical facilities who retain large amounts of sensitive information need access to those files immediately are enticing targets, as they are more likely to pay to have the data restored. Ransomware has been the most pervasive cyber threat since 2005. According to publicly available information, ransomware infections may have outnumbered data breaches over the last 11 years. Some research bodies suggest that ransomware damage in 2019 will exceed $11.5 billion. And why? Because it's a lucrative business. It is extremely lucrative for cyber criminals, and they are going to continue to grow and use this technique of the value of encrypting and restricting access to users' data. Why? Because it makes them money. Let's look at a couple of the types of different ransomware. The most common types are crypto types. They are used to encrypt the files or data that prohibit access. There's also lockers that are used to lock your computer or device. Those can be done potentially at the BIOS of the operating system. So your data is not actually encrypted. It's just you can't get to it. There are other types. There's scareware. It claims to find issues on your computer, and then they resolve them for money. Or there's doxware, which threatens to publish your information if you don't pay a ransom. And while we don't see doxware used very often, we recently saw a major hotel chain that was impacted by this, where they were told that someone had compromised hundreds of thousands of sensitive information, and they would expose that if they didn't pay the ransom. There's also ransomware as a service that's hosted anonymously by hackers. So if you were so inclined to wander out into the dark web, you could actually find websites that you could potentially just put an email address in, put a bunch of email addresses that you wanted to send phishing emails to, and if they collected ransom, then they would pay you a percentage of that ransom. So it's that easy to do to act maliciously in this case when it's available as ransomware as a service. Now, what do these types all have in common? Well, they hijack your data and do not allow you access until you pay a fee. So let's talk a little bit about do's and don'ts. Do have a proactive cybersecurity framework. Now, I talked a little bit about the Texas Cybersecurity Framework. We'll talk a little bit about the NIST security framework. NIST is actually the National Institute of Standards and Technology. The Texas Cybersecurity Framework is required for all state agencies and higher education. It consists of about 40 objectives compared to the NIST framework, which has over 1,000 objectives. But the Texas Cybersecurity Framework is based off of NIST. We just combined a bunch of different areas to make up a smaller list. And we'll talk further about this. We'll actually be doing for the educational community, and we'll invite anyone that would like to sit in on that webinar about Texas Cybersecurity Framework later in the fall, and we'll put up some information about that. Back up your systems and files and verify that they're backed up. Now, how do you verify that they're backed up? Well, you need to restore them to some other location and see if you can access that data from your application or whatever you use that data for. But make sure that you can read that data. Store your backups separately and off-site. It's really convenient when you leave your backups linked up so they don't have to run a script or anything to connect to those backups. But when you do, you jeopardize and create a risk should you have ransomware, an infection that begins to crawl across all the linked networks, and then it could encrypt your backups as well. So if you have an attack in which your main systems are encrypted as well as your backup, you're in serious trouble. We also recommend that you update your software, your third-party softwares, and your operating systems to the latest patches as quickly as possible. And most importantly, you need to train your employees. You need to provide security awareness training, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that shortly. Talk about some of the don'ts. Well, don't automatically open email attachments. For those of us that have been around in the cybersecurity field for a long time, at the turn of the century, we had something that swept the world globally called I Love You virus. And I was working for an international company at the time, and we detected that in Europe. We could not delete the I Love You emails fast enough on the mail server, and we had to post signs in the elevators in all of our offices: do not open anything that has a subject of I love you. Yes, we still had people that got infected. Don't provide your personal or financial information via email or unsolicited phone call, text messages, or instant message. Be cognizant when you're in a crowd. If you're at a restaurant, what you're talking about. There are people that are potentially listening to you. So try not to share that information. And don't share your personal or financial information or anything about your organization or how their IT works via email, unsolicited phone call, again, text message or instant message. And don't allow users to install and run software. Apply the concept of least privilege. That concept basically says that everyone doesn't need to have administrative privileges to do their job. So you want to assign them the least amount of privileges that it will require them just to do their job. Just by providing a concept of least privilege, you can potentially help prevent ransomware from spreading. In most cases, they have to be able to install something on a computer or laptop or a workstation or a device. So the concept of least privileges is something that we need to practice on a regular basis. Prevention and detection. We also recommend you run frequently scheduled security scans. All the software on your system, your security software, is not going to do you any good if you're not scanning your computers and mobile devices on a regular basis. And we'll just kind of touch a little bit on mobile devices, but if you allow mobile devices to connect up to your internet, into your network, we recommend that you segment that network, and that's one of the things that we'll talk about. But mobile devices, I recommend segmenting them where they only have access to the internet, but if you allow that. So I just wanted to make that point. You know, your scans are a second layer of defense. You can scan your applications for vulnerabilities. That's another way that ransomware spreads, is through known vulnerabilities within software. And if you don't patch those, you find it and remediate those issues, then you potentially leave a door open for all types of attackers, including ransomware. They detect your threats, and a real-time checker may not be able to find. So while we have antivirus that's real-time and checking on that, there are other ways that they can find vulnerabilities, and they will. Recommends enforcing strong password security. Utilize a passwords management strategy that incorporates enterprise passwording, our managers, and best practices of password security. And segment your network. Limit the data an attacker can access. With dynamic control access, you help ensure that your entire network security is not compromised in a single attack. Segregate your network into distinct zones, each requiring different credentials. So those are some of the things that we can do to help prevent ransomware from being able to get in and infect our systems and encrypt our data. You should employ content scanning filtering on your email servers. Inbound emails should be scanned for known threats. I recommend blocking any type of attachments that pose a threat, such as those ending in .exe or .bat. If you need to have those files delivered, there are other ways that you can deliver them, but don't allow them in email. I think that's would certainly help as well. Also use reputable antivirus software and a firewall. Maintaining a firewall and updating your security software is critical. You want to review your firewall rules from time to time. Bring in a third party, that can help you analyze those and make sure they're working properly. It wasn't too long ago that I looked at a set of rules, and I think the 8th rule down was allow any, and that means that anything can come in. So if you take the time to review those firewall rules and make sure that they're doing what they're supposed to do. And once again, we're going to emphasize educating your staff. Provide security awareness training. We will be providing a webinar later on in our fall series about House Bill 3834 that now is going to require all local governments, including school districts, to provide annual security awareness training for their staff. So that goes into effect as of now. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in that presentation. So if you're not offering security awareness, and there are certain requirements under that House bill, actually it requires the security awareness training that you're providing to be certified by the Department of Information Resources. And they're just now starting that certification process. They anticipate that they'll have a list out hopefully by the 1st of November of security awareness training that has been certified for use in schools and local governments. Removal. Contact your IT support, your IT security team if you have one. Hopefully they can remove the malware from the device. But note that just removing the malware doesn't mean that it's going to be readily unencrypted. It will still potentially be encrypted and will require a key to unlock those files. Per requirements of Senate Bill 820 in the last session that we had, school districts are required to report incidents to TEA. We'll cover that in one of our future webinars as well. But I recommend school districts can also alert their regional office, their ESC. I recommend anybody contacting the FBI if they have a ransomware attack. In most cases, your local law enforcement will not have jurisdiction because you have no idea where that attack came from. So our FBI is the best law enforcement resource that we potentially have. Isolate the infected device or system. Remove it from all your networks. You don't have to turn it off. You can keep it running. There's potentially, if you're going to do forensics, you may want to be able to dump the memory in that, so you don't have to turn it off. But make sure you disable the wireless connections, your Bluetooth connections, any potential network capabilities, so that it doesn't keep spreading. So ensure that your shared and network files are disconnected, whether they're wired or wireless. Those are things that you can do to stop that from spreading. Secure your backups. Ensure that your backup data is offline and secure. If possible, from time to time, scan your backup data with an antivirus program just to check to make sure it's free of malware. So those are some of the suggestions that we have in regarding removal or of next steps should you be infected with ransomware. The next step would be recovery. So what do we need to do? Well, we don't need to tackle that when it happens. We need to plan for those types of events. So by planning cyber resilience and maintaining offsite, potentially backup servers, organizations can recover from attacks much faster. Revisit your cybersecurity plans. Make necessary updates, ensuring that critical infrastructure is protected. Prevention is the most effective approach, rather than trying to treat the systems. I strongly recommend, just like if you do a disaster backup recovery exercise every year, that can be just a tabletop. I recommend that you do the same for cybersecurity threats. We have a presentation on how to write and develop a cybersecurity exercise. So there's actually 2 or 3 different exercises out there on our Texas Gateway portal that anybody can take a look at those and implement something similar, or listen to the webinar on how to develop one. Every time that you do a cybersecurity exercise, you're going to find something that didn't show up the last time. So the more often that you do that, it helps you get down, develop that routine in doing that. It also makes it much easier for you to do should you actually have a full-blown incident. One of the resources that's out on the texasgateway.org is the Department of Information Resources Incident Response Red Book, and that is a template that has all the state statutes, talks about what is confidential information. I can tell you that on page 12, there is a list of things that you need to be working on triage. So when you think you have a security incident, you can turn to page 12, and here's a list of things that you need to be doing. And that whole, that's probably about a 100-page document that that you can look at. But it really helps. In fact, it even has examples of how to write notifications to people that have had their data exposed. And so that's a really good resource. So if I recommend you going out to that site, that portal, and downloading that information. And then the question comes to pay or not to pay. We look at, currently from what we've seen, statistics show that 40% of the ransomware victims paid the ransom. That's why it's still lucrative. Baltimore city government was hit with the massive ransomware in 2019 and was left crippled for over a month. Their estimated loss value was $18 million. After getting hit by SamSam ransomware in March of 2018, Atlanta, Georgia has spent over $5 million rebuilding its computer network, including $3 million spending for hiring emergency consultants and crisis managers. And if you plan and do exercises on a regular basis, you may not need to bring in emergency consultants and crisis managers. Now, a Massachusetts school district paid $10,000 in Bitcoin after a ransomware attack in April 2016. Many local governments and schools have cyber insurance, and some of those cyber insurance policies do pay the ransom in ransomware. But if you have cybersecurity insurance, be sure and take a look at what the policy pays for and what it does not. You need to understand what it covers and what your first steps are should you have an incident. The pay or not to pay, this is going to be a decision that needs to be made by each organization on a case-by-case business. If you have good backups, they're off-site, you're able to restore your data, you can rebuild your servers and restore that data without paying a ransom. But the only way that you know that you can restore all of your data is make sure that they verify it and test that. So you need to be able to practice prevention before you get into a crisis situation. While regaining control of your data is the ultimate objective, please consider, the FBI and law enforcement discourages agencies and organizations from paying the ransom because it encouraged future attacks. If no one was paying the ransom, would we have ransomware? It would quickly go away. But as long as people pay and it's a lucrative business, we're going to see these types of attacks. So take preventive measures and have a proactive cybersecurity plan is a key to preventing ransomware and being prepared in case you should be a victim. So I talked about a little bit about upcoming cybersecurity webinars. We have 3 scheduled this fall. The first one is cybersecurity tips and tools, and that will be regarding Senate Bill 820 and House Bill 3834. 820 has specific ramifications for schools. 3834 is all local governments, including schools. So, we encourage you to sign up for this webinar. I've got the link out there. We are going to publish these slides at the Texas Gateway portal, so you can copy that registration link down and attend that conference if you would like. Another one we have coming up is talking about the Texas cybersecurity framework, and we're going to try to simplify that down from 40 objectives into 5 major categories of identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. Those are the 5 major categories that are defined by NIST. So we're going to try to make that seem as simple as possible. The Texas Cybersecurity Framework is a self-assessment that you can do on your own that'll help you identify where you have risk, and then it'll help you also identify mitigation plans and will help with that. So the Texas Cybersecurity Framework is downloadable at our Texas Gateway portal. The last webinar that we're going to have in this fall session will be November the 6th, and it is talking about basic incident response. So in that webinar, we'll talk about some of the things that you need to do to be prepared for incident response and what you can do to practice those in a preventive type. At some point in time, we're all going to experience cybersecurity incident, whether it involves a major exposure of sensitive information or whether it's just a cyber event. We all need to be prepared and understand how we can handle that. So hopefully those webinars will help give you a better understanding of what needs to be done in case we have situations come up, and work with basic incident response. I'm going to list our resources and the sources that we quoted out here just as a guide. Again, we'll post these slides. We'll post the recording of this. At this time, we're going to take a look at our questions and answers, and I want to invite our special guest to join us. Let's see if
Hey, Frosty, it's
yeah,
Jordan Lloyd from FBI on the line.
Yeah, Jordan, thank you very much. We'd like for you to make some comments, and then we'll send some questions your way if anybody has any questions. We appreciate you joining us today. Thank you, Jordan.
Thank you, sir, for having us. Just a couple things I want to touch on. Just when it comes to ransomware, what we see is our adversaries often leverage or compromise targets of opportunity. So they're looking across the internet, scanning computer networks, and they're looking for essentially an easy target. So I would just say if you have devices that are exposed directly to the internet, you might just want to be aware of that risk. Some of these devices that we commonly see on the edge of school networks and other education infrastructure is stuff like printers, Polycom equipment, things like that were never intended to defend against a computer network attack. So just something to think about there. And then just following on to what Frosty was saying about developing an incident response plan, I would just encourage you to develop that and practice it, and just continue to refine it. Just from going out on site and being a part of these incident response process with entities all throughout the state of Texas and from out on the East Coast, you really that practice really shows when an event occurs. We're able to really really address the situation. A good response plan addresses stuff like how to deal with the media, legal impact, things like that may not necessarily come to mind immediately, but they become a big part of an incident response. And lastly, I would say I just encourage you to contact your local FBI field office or RA, just whatever office is near you. If we're able to develop contact with you and kind of get to know who you are and what you're doing in the community, I mean, we're happy to help you any way we can, and we can talk to you about what we're seeing in your community, and hopefully we can help you out. My name's Jordan Lloyd. I happen to work out of the FBI office here in Austin. If you're in Central Texas, we welcome your call. We have a team here, and any computer intrusion matter, we're happy to work with you. Frosty, that's it for me.
All right, well, Jordan, thank you very much. And actually for our schools, we are working with the FBI to make sure that we have a contact for all 20 of our ESC, our regional offices. So for school districts, you can probably you'll be able to get a hold of the FBI through your ESC or your regional office, or call the field office. They've been very responsive. I've been very fortunate to have been working with the FBI on cybersecurity incidents for a long time, and I haven't worked with the FBI on one since yesterday. So they they really are very nice to work with. They've been very helpful in a lot of situations, and hopefully we'll get this ransomware thing under control. We have had some questions that have come up. Let's see. Go back here. So someone has made a comment that to remind everybody that there is no guarantee that paying your ransom, you'll be able to recover your data. We are dealing with criminals. So are you dealing with a criminal that's going to give you the right key to unencrypt that? And even if they do give you the right key and you get your data back, you're still going to have to spend time and working on your systems, because they may, while they've had your data, they may have created backdoors for them to get into it again, which makes you vulnerable again. So you need to make sure that if you've been a victim, that you spend the time and if you pay that ransom, you want to be sure and look for, have somebody come in and take a look to make sure that you're not going to be compromised easily again. I can send the URL out to all the attendees of the Texas Gateway, the portal of where we'll have the where we'll have the webinar and the slideshows. So I will be able to do that. We have a school-specific question. It has to do with the schools are required to designate a cybersecurity coordinator to TEA. We're modifying Ask TED, which is an application that schools are used to using. That is scheduled to go into production next week. So I'm hoping that I'll have screenshots for that when we talk about Senate Bill 820, which requires the schools to designate a cybersecurity coordinator. But our plan is for them to provide the cybersecurity coordinator, all schools to provide a cybersecurity coordinator within Ask TED. Let's see, I had a question here regarding to pay or not to pay. What is the general recommendation, and what are the pros and cons of both? Jordan, can you answer that question, or would you like for me to take that?
I'll just kind of make a few comments here on that. First of all, we don't tell people what to do in these scenarios. They're all unique, and it really it's more of a business decision in our opinion. But as a general rule, we don't agree with paying a ransom because it does perpetuate the crime. You are contributing financial resources to an organized crime entity that's going to exploit profit off of you, and then they're going to exploit subsequent victims. I'll tell you something that's kind of interesting related to ransomware, and this kind of plays into the question a little bit. What we see is sometimes there are industries that are known to be well-financed, or they're basically willing victims. As an industry, they generally pay a ransom, and so our ransomware hackers they can and will target a specific industry because they see it as more of an opportunity. So just for what it's worth, if education was an industry that that was less prone to do something like that, it would be an indicator for the adversary to potentially move elsewhere.
Okay, and I'll just reiterate what Jordan has said, and the fact that every situation is unique. So ideally, if you are doing preventive and you do a tabletop, I think you should look at doing a tabletop in which you are forced to pay the ransom. Maybe your backups are also encrypted, as well as one that you are able to recover from and you don't pay. So you've looked at both situations so that you can make a better business decision on what's the best for your entity involved in this situation, because you have to look at every situation independently.
Yeah, and Frosty, I would also just add one thing to that. Whenever it comes down to this type of a scenario, on that prevention side that you went over real well, I mean, just think about kind of where your important data is on your network. Think about, is it in a cloud service like Google or Microsoft, or is it on a server on your site? And kind of think about protection, not only holistically across your infrastructure, but just kind of think about it in terms of your information. Like sometimes some information is more important than other information that would be essential. So maybe you would protect it differently. That would be maybe you protect it in a way that allow for more protection against something like ransomware. So maybe your network gets hit with ransomware, but the data that's essential to operations, you're able to recover and operate from.
Very good. I'll make another comment that because I'm asked this question frequently. If I encrypt my sensitive data, does that prevent ransomware from encrypting it? And the answer to that's no. What you've done is when you encrypt that data, you're preventing that from an accidental exposure. But ransomware would just take those encrypted files and re-encrypt it. And it could make it harder for you if you don't have all the keys than to unencrypt that if you do pay a ransom and get the keys. But while that's a great cybersecurity practice, does it prevent ransomware? And the answer to that's no, it does not. Let's see. Had a question of where can we get a list of FBI contacts? Your local field office. I will reach out to our FBI folks that I work with all the time and see if we can't get a list of local field offices across the state that we can provide them to. You typically find that in the phone book listed, a number to contact, but we'll see if we can't provide that information for you.
Yeah, and just so San Antonio, Dallas, Houston, and Austin all have cyber squads. So everywhere else we might have, but we have a lot of other offices called resident agencies. Some of those have expertise in cyber issues. Some of them refer to the primary field offices. But if you go to FBI.gov, you'll find your nearest office, and you can make contact from there. And then that person will put you in contact with the right cyber agent who can address your needs.
And you'll find more information. Thank you for reminding me that you'll find more information at the FBI.gov website. There's a lot of information out there, as well as at the Department of Homeland Security. For many of us that work in government, local government, Homeland Security also provides free cybersecurity training, and so that's another resource that we can often take advantage of. Another question has come in about the Texas Cybersecurity Framework. Will we send out a link? We will send out a link for where that is located as well. So we'll include that. Is there a threshold in regard to devices infected before you report to TEA? Legislatively requirements, you are required to report anything in which involves exposure of student data. I recommend you contact TEA and ESC anytime you think you have an issue, because both the regional offices as well as TEA can help potentially with resources that you may need. So even though we are only going to be collecting and generating a anomalized report data to the legislative on any data that any exposure of student data, we'd still be able to provide potential resources where you could get additional help to work with. Let's see. Was TEA impacted directly by ransomware attack that you mentioned earlier? No, that was not TEA. I was working with other entities. So TEA has, knock on wood, we do a lot of preventive work here, and we certainly hope that never happens. But again, preventive and proactive cybersecurity measures are the most important thing that you can do to prevent that. I'm not able to share Jordan's direct contact information, but again, through the FBI website, you can find a field office. We'll try to provide numbers for field offices as well, but I won't share his information directly. But if somebody needs to contact the FBI, they can always reach out to me as well, and I can put you in touch with the FBI. Is K through 12 one of the higher trending industries for more cybersecurity attacks? I'm going to answer that yes. The reason that I say that is because of the value of information that we have. Student data can be used for a long period of time before it's potentially detected. As adults, we would typically know if someone has stolen our identity and using our sensitive information, social security numbers, things like that, within a 6-month period. But student information may not be recognized that data has been compromised and being used until they reach an age that they get a job, or until they go to college. So criminals like to use that information because it has a longer life than 6 months. So I do think that we see a higher trend in the educational field because of that factor. Now, have the authorities ever caught perpetrators of a ransomware attack? Jordan, can you answer that?
Absolutely. We work those cases here in this office. We're successful in the identification and locate process for those individuals. We have a great track record. They're not easy cases. They take a while, but we're driven to hold somebody accountable for what happens on your computer system when somebody tries to victimize you. We strongly believe that person should be held accountable for what they did to you. I'll also tell you this: if you call the FBI, we're discreet, right? Like when we show up to especially a government entity to have a discussion, people aren't gonna necessarily be aware that we're there, unless except for the individuals who need to be involved, right? Like the leadership. And I would also say when you contact the FBI, we don't, it's important that you report this stuff to us because we don't know about it if you don't report it. And if it goes unreported, that means that we're not able to message to our elected officials clearly the scope of impact of this type of crime. So that's kind of a piece that people don't necessarily realize, that we're very involved in. All of our numbers in terms of loss and impact across the country contribute to the the executive branch awareness of these types of problems.
And I will also add that you know, I have seen cases where we see oftentimes phishing emails where someone requests them to change a bank account for an account, and then you don't realize that money is being shipped overseas, and you think, what's the chances of us finding that perpetrator in that case? But I can say that we've seen a couple of incidences in which we have which we've been able to catch those perpetrators. Were they able to recover all the funds that were extracted? Um, the answer to that's no, but they have been able to recover some of that. So you know, reporting any incident like this is important, because, like Jordan said, unless they know about it, they can't help. So
Yeah.
it's important to report that.
And Frosty, just one more piece on that. When you are a victim of a fraudulent wire transfer, somebody causes you to wire transfer money to a bank account, under a false identity. What you can do is report that to ic3.gov. What we do on that site is whenever you report a fraudulent wire transfer, we'll go on the back end and we'll pursue the foreign financial institution, or I should say the beneficiary financial institution where that money went. And we'll try to get them to freeze the money. That's something we automatically do every time somebody reports one of those. So I would strongly encourage that, if the education institution has a situation like that, to report it to us as soon as possible, and we'll take action on it.
Okay. I got a couple more questions here. We've got about 4 minutes left in our time. It talks about, it appears as though oftentimes these type of cyber attacks come in waves in specific industries. Can school districts get a head up on these type of attacks as well? You know, and that is one of the things that we're trying to do when we furnish webinars and have a portal to provide information to. So we're trying to provide as much information to our school districts. I know DIR is doing the same thing for our local government partners as well. So I think that's those between DIR and our cybersecurity portal for the education community. Those are two really good sources that you can go and try to look for current threats as well. Within the education community, TASB and some of those organizations oftentimes furnish additional information as well. Let's see. So someone asked about Ask Ted and when will that be ready? We're hoping we'll have that again in production, and we'll make an announcement to the school districts when it is in production, so that school districts can designate their a cybersecurity coordinator that was supposed to have been designated by September 1st. And then they're required to notify them through Ask Ted. So we're working diligently on getting that resolved. Again, we talked about free training resources. If you go to that Texas Gateway portal, we'll send that link out to everybody. There's a wealth of free information on free cybersecurity training that's there. I want to know if there's a form that's expected when you need to fill out in case of a report to TEA. What we ask you to do, we're going to provide an email address. You can call us, you can email us. You know, the first things first, if you have a situation, we want to try to help you. We will be collecting some information regarding any breach that involved or potential exposure of student data. So we will work with that, but we want to collect. You know, we want to get you moving and trying to resolve that incident. We're not so concerned about collecting all the details right up front. So hopefully we will not have very many exposures of student data in the upcoming year. So we hope we don't have to provide a lot of information for that. Question about InfoGuard. There are several local chapters of InfoGuard. That is a Jordan. Can you give a little more description about InfoGuard and what it does?
Yeah, sure. So InfoGuard's a public-private partnership where we're able to provide you information that relates to your industry and kind of stay in touch with you on threats that we see across the cases that we work. It's a great way for us to get to know you. We have InfoGuard in San Antonio, Austin, and Dallas, and Houston. There are probably more chapters throughout the state of Texas. If it's something that interests you, we have a website, INFRAGARD. You can go Google that. Hit it. We have a good website out there for additional information, and that's where you'd sign up as well.
Okay. Had a question here wanted to know specifically about sensitive student data information. It had to include a social security number. That's not the only thing that's classified as sensitive within FERPA or within state statutes, grades. There are several other things that's classified as sensitive information. We'll try to cover that in one of our upcoming webinars. We have lots of questions. As we're wrapping this up, we will collect all these questions and we will distribute answers out to the whole group that's set on this webinar today, because we do have your email. So with that, I think we're going to have to wrap this up today. Lots of great questions. We appreciate everybody. Until we see you again on another cybersecurity call, hopefully you have some ideas of some of the preventive things that we can do to prevent ransomware. Thank y'all very much. Y'all have a great day. Thank you.
Thank you.